as we're about to see, the littlest change can really throw off our insect populations. So, as I just said, what can be done? This is kind of a bummer, not really starting off the first of 3 talkers with some really uplifting things. So what can be done? As I just said, 5% of all native plants support 75% of local insects. So as the speaker that speaks about invasive plants is also going to understand, our native plants are very important. Because even though, especially our pollinators, you can plant clover, you can plant any flowering plant, they will forage on that. They're just programmed to do that. That's not the issue. The issue is, where do our pollinators make their homes, forage on, lay eggs on, much like the monarch butterfly to its specific milkweed plant. It can't reproduce without milkweed. It will not lay eggs anywhere else. So that's where our native plants are so important, because our insects have evolved to understand what to do with those plants. And just moving plants around may benefit people, may benefit other animals, but insects specifically just don't know what to do with them. And it could take thousands of years, if ever, for them to start to reprogram and refigure it out. And that amount of time is just not on our side. So they have evolved highly specific relationships with our native plants. So the best thing you can do for pollinator gardening is obviously to plant native plants. And then the key things to really think about when wanting to plant a pollinator garden is to extend bloom times, kind of like the no-mow May. It's similar principles to this. Spring, early fall, a lot of our native plants are in flower. If you can plug gaps either earlier, peak summer, especially if we're having a drought, late into the fall, when the vast majority of our flowering native plants have not been evolutionarily rewarded to flower, whether it be a frost or anything like that. So if you can sneak some non-native plants in that aren't going to be harmful to the environment, again, from a pollinator standpoint, that's what we really want to do, is extend the bloom time, because their food comes from the nectar in the flowers. And like I said in the beginning, we want to plant to the site specifically, and it can change from everyone's house is going to be a little different. Town to town changes wildly. County to county might as well be state to state. So that's why I want to keep this really topical, kind of 10,000 foot view, because someone's needs, even just here in Winchester, across town, just a few roads over, can be wildly different. So each site is very specific to the planting opportunities. Like I said, when considering what to plant in a pollinator garden, keystone species, milkweed to monarchs, if you have a particular pollinator you really like, really want to see, plant the plants that are known to host it. Shrubs, large canopy trees, it all is within the pollinator landscaping kind of realm. This time of year, I've been noticing the red maples really swelling up. They're about to flower. As far as our trees go, they're one of the earliest ones we have natively. Fantastic for our pollinators. Gets them up and going, gets the food they need to get going nice and early in the year. So, you can think about probably a traditional pollinator garden, whether it's like a wildflower meadow, that's kind of the picture I have there. But you can think really outside of the box. Spring ephemerals are a beautiful way to do it. Really short-lived plants in the spring, but in early March, when we have that first 50, 60 degree day, that's all there is for these insects. So every little thing you can do really helps. So pollinator gardening, large areas, small, I would say don't overthink it, whether you want to just plant around your mailbox at the end of your driveway, or you want to turn the vast majority of your property into a pollinator garden. Every little bit helps. Every little bit is going to make a big difference. Like I said, plant natives, it's what our insects need. It's what's really going to benefit them. If you can find natives like witch hazel that wants to flower really early or late in the season, fantastic. Really going to help the pollinators out. Planting in clusters is a particularly helpful thing, because a lot of these types of plants don't necessarily like to be singular. You kind of want to plant in groups, whether it be bulbs or anything like that. And then what I always like to say too is choose diversity, choose things that you like, whether you like a specific color of flower, a shape of a flower, plant whatever's interesting to you, the homeowner, whether you're helping out in a public garden sense, just have fun with it. Make it pretty, make it just easy. That's the way to do it. And above all, as I've mentioned many times, you just have to avoid those chemicals. I could talk all night on just that, but their ability to translocate through plants and the detrimental impact that they have on our insects is what gets us. A couple of us were talking earlier. A philosophy that I have in business is the businesses that take other businesses or other things into consideration outside of their sphere are the ones down the road that will be most impactful. So as a couple people know, I grew up landscaping, doing tree work, and I still know how to make a plant look just perfect. I could, not a single nibble on a single leaf, but it's super damaging. I mean, you've basically made a poison plant that every insect that's going to come and visit that plant to pollinate, maybe just eat, is super hard on it. So my point on that is, as a beekeeper, as a gardener, you got to take all of this into consideration. Don't look at it as just a plant. It is also habitat. It is forage for some insects. Some animals are going to eat those leaves, chew on them. That's all right. We'll deal with it if it gets real bad, but it's okay if a few things get nibbled. It is a bigger picture kind of thing. So having that philosophy of, yes, we're planting a garden, maybe the deer are going to walk through it, trample a bunch of things, maybe some insects are going to chew on some grasses. It's totally fine. That's the way we move forward when we can stop using chemicals to this really high level where it's just really detrimental to, like I said, the foundational building block of our entire ecology here, which is insects. So to wrap it up, obviously the benefits of pollinating insects, as we've pretty much gone over, is that they're super important to the vast majority of our plants. 75% of all flowering plants. They're on the decline, so if you're already planning a landscape project, if you already want a garden, I would just kind of ask people to say, hey, as opposed to planting something that may not flower or is non-native, doesn't really benefit anyone, minus an aesthetic view, which again, great, plant it, but also plant something that is going to benefit our local insects, that is native, they will know how to work with it. And like I said, above all, just have fun with it. Gardening's super fun. Everyone I know that's ever gotten into plants as a hobby or to a job, it gets in your blood, it gets in your DNA. We all love it. It's super fun. It's awesome to just work with nature in that sort of way, to build something. Whether you're taking a lawn and making it a pollinator landscape, you can make a lawn into more of a pollinator lawn. You can get really creative with it. There's people doing really interesting things out there. And above all, I really just like to say, enjoy your hard work. It is a lot of work. You're out there in the heat, you're out there in the rain, you're working on the whole thing. Set up some benches so you can watch the pollinators come in after all your hard work. It's really rewarding to watch local bees, bumblebees, the first wave of butterflies come through in the summer. And you did that. That's really cool. It's really interesting to have that hard work immediately pay off, because our insects are going to find it. I could talk about honeybees till we're all asleep here in the middle of the night, but they are all insects are amazing creatures. Their sense of smell, their sense of taste, they are like nothing else we will ever have in the animal kingdom, and they need to be protected. They're very important. So, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I meant to mention, we will have a question and answer period at the very end. Yeah, do it all right now. Our next speaker is Laura Hart. She's going to speak about rain gardens and bioswales. Laura is the Conservation Director of the Farmington River Watershed Association, leading water quality and green infrastructure initiatives. She will share how rain gardens, bioswales, and simple stormwater solutions reduce runoff and pollution before it reaches local waterways, and will provide some downspout diverter kits for attendees, which are over there. And Laura has built a really nice rain garden here. at Highland Lake.
Great, thank you. Is there a pointer to switch through, or? Okay, so this is for, to go to the next slide. Or whichever one works. Hello, everyone. Like I was introduced, my name is Laura. I'm so happy to be here and see you all out this evening, and excited to hear and have heard from the other presenters. So I work for the Farmington River Watershed Association. Some of you know us, but we are a local nonprofit that has been around since 1953, and it was from people like you concerned about our environment that got together to try to make a change and improve our water quality. And now we're actually larger than we ever have. We have 6 staff members, so we're out all over our watershed doing all sorts of good work. And for those of you who don't know, the watershed itself actually starts up in Massachusetts, flows down here through Winchester, and then starts heading north once it hits Farmington, and eventually ends up at the confluence with the Connecticut River. So everything that happens in our watershed affects not only our watershed, but the Connecticut River and Long Island Sound. So it's something we're always thinking about, kind of the bigger picture of where we are. So, which brings me to today, and what we want to talk about is why rain gardens and bioswales. Why do we do this? Why do we, as kind of a watershed organization, care about rain gardens and bioswales? And it's because our #1 water quality concern in the Farmington River, in the tributaries, and across the U.S. is polluted stormwater runoff. So the more development we have creates more hard surfaces, right? More parking lots, more buildings, more development. And what happens when it rains on those surfaces is picking up pollutants that are there. It's warming up, and all of that, it's getting rushed into storm drains, and most often going directly into our water bodies. So carrying all of that. Extra nutrients can be in there, just trash itself, and another one we're very concerned about is chloride. So road salts are ending up in our water bodies, and that has a real impact on the health of our waterways. So it affects the temperature, it affects the aquatic life that are there, it affects the whole chain of everything that uses our waterways. And we think about last year, we got a lot of rain, right? But most of the year, and especially up in Massachusetts, we were in a drought. And that's because we get these heavy rains after it's been dry, and it's hitting hard surfaces like pavement or lawns, which are not great either. They're slightly better than pavement. And then just rushing off. It doesn't have time to absorb into the ground, to recharge our groundwater, to do the natural process. So that's why we're really concerned about this, and why we focus on rain gardens and bioswales. So we do a lot of water quality monitoring throughout our whole watershed, on the Mad and Still and all our tributaries. So we're out everywhere collecting data to see changes over time, changes over land use, changes from our tributaries into the river. And we have data going back over 20 years now, so we can see some longer term trends. But what this leads us to is, yes, it's good to collect data and to see what's going on, but then what? We can't just sit on this information. We do share it, obviously, with the state and our other partners, but where does that lead us? We look and we find, okay, maybe we're seeing a change here. Maybe we're seeing some problems. The water temperature's higher, there's more nutrients there, there's more bacteria. And then we look at that area, what can we do about it? Is this a location where we can do some preservation? Is this a location where we can try to disconnect those hard surfaces from our water bodies? Is there a way to improve the water quality. And a lot of this is opportunity. You know, there's plenty of places that would be an ideal location, but we're fighting, you know, what is already there or new development going in. So we also have to kind of look at what is available, what is something that we can do now. And so working with municipalities and homeowners that can say, hey, I have a location, let's go in there and let's try to make a change. So the solutions, there's a number of solutions, but the ones we're focusing on today is the rain gardens, buffers, and bioswales. So we have this program that we call River Smart, and that is all about helping reduce polluted stormwater runoff. And we have its own website as well, so there's a lot of resources for homeowners, for anyone that kind of cares about water quality and how they can make a change on land to improve our water quality. So that's kind of our platform that we use. And it was created a number of years ago with our organizations and a number of other founding partners. And there's a lot of good resources on there, so I encourage you to check that out. And then there's some very simple actions under our River Smart educational program, including nurturing native plants that helps the pollinators, and planting buffers, reducing or stopping using fertilizers, and so on. And so this is kind of our springboard for explaining this to the communities, and then also creating implementation projects. So one kind of already touched on a little bit, you know, lawns are deserts for our pollinators, and they're also not really beneficial to the water quality as well. So anytime we have the opportunity to switch lawns over or a portion of a lawn into a garden planted with native plants, that is benefiting a whole realm of options. So it's benefiting the water, it's benefiting native wildlife, and so on. So again, you know, I kind of mentioned this, that grass, yes, can absorb a little bit more water than pavement, but it's really not that great compared to a forest or compared to native plants that have much deeper roots that can absorb more water and again kind of recharge that back into our local aquifer so that the rain is falling and it's actually staying in place instead of being rushed off. And another thing that's great when we do outreach is if people don't like geese, well, don't have so much lawn, especially lawn leading straight up to a water body. So if you're mowing right to the edge of a pond or a river, they love that. So that's a great way to encourage, hey, let's plant a natural buffer here, and they'll be less likely to habitat that space. So natural buffers is a great way to introduce native plants, to slow down the velocity of water running off from these hard surfaces, to let it infiltrate into the ground, and also can provide shade to a water body too, reducing the temperatures, brings more oxygen to the water, and thus helping aquatic life. So there's a whole slew of benefits to natural buffers. I'm not going to get into all of that today. And then native plants, I think you're going to hear a little bit more about how important it is. There's so many benefits to planting native plants. One is just they're adapted to the environment that we're in now. So you're going to have less work to do over the long term once they're established than you would something else that's not native to this area. And there's great resources out there for what type of plants work in various situations. Connecticut, we often generally have pretty sandy soil, so that's something to keep in mind, but you know, everybody's spot might be a little bit different. So once these plants are established that we use in our rain gardens and bioswales and buffer plantings, once they have rooted, they require overall less water. They can often handle bigger fluctuations between some heavier downpours and some periods of drought. You know, we don't need to be adding in fertilizers or pesticides and so on. And it's great habitat, as we've just heard. So with our whole River Smart program, we do also have a River Smart pledge, which is something that homeowners can take to just say, hey, I'm going to do a few small actions to help reduce polluted stormwater runoff. And a very cool thing that happened here in Winchester is that some students, I believe this was last year, took our River Smart pledge and turned it into a business River Smart pledge for this town, so that some of the businesses could take some actions to reduce polluted stormwater runoff as well. So that's just a cool thing. Hopefully some of you already know about this. And then I just want to talk quickly about a couple of projects that we've done, because they can be used as examples for other places in town, but also can be scaled down for your own home. So if you want to, install a rain garden or a bioswale on your own property, there's a lot of resources out there to figure out sizing and so. But basically, diverting a downspout, for example, from a portion of your roof and letting that rainwater go into kind of a slightly dug out area where then you plant it with natives is just a great thing to do, and it can provide benefits for the pollinators and all of that as well. So we've done a lot of work in Bristol, and a lot of it kicked off with a watershed-based plan that we did for the Pequabic River, and that actually called out locations in town on town property where it would be a great place to install a rain garden or a bioswale or something like that. And the exciting news is that now we have funding from the state to do a watershed-based plan for the Mad and the Still River, which we've been waiting for a long time. So we're really excited to be kicking that off, and you'll probably be hearing from me more once that goes in. But yeah, Page Park Rain Garden, this was a building that we put gutters on so that that rainwater that was falling on that surface would then soak into the ground. It didn't look very appealing. There was a playground next to here. So we were able to involve some students from the school across the street, kind of dig it out so that the water would be directed into those areas. Some was coming from the parking lot as well. And then planting it with the native plants, mulching it, great educational opportunity. And then you see the plants are a little bit smaller to start off, but they've done really well and grown tall. We have some educational signs there. So just really great way to make a place look more beautiful, provide wildlife habitat, and improve water quality all in one. And then we did a very similar thing at Rockwell Park, also in Bristol. Again, a place that didn't look very appealing. Dug it out, created a berm. What you do want to do with a rain garden is have an overflow area. So if we have one of these crazy storms where there's tons of water coming in very quickly and it doesn't have enough time to absorb down in or to hold it in the shape that you've made, you want to direct it into some spot like a lawn or somewhere else where the water can safely flow if it does exceed that amount. So again, same kind of concept, just a different shape and design, and you can have a lot of fun with it. There's so many different plants you can choose. And then just last year we did a big bioswale at Edgewood School in Bristol as well. This was a really large installation, so we were very excited about it, capturing runoff from rooftops and from parking lots. So you can kind of see the direction of where the water was flowing. And so here's the bioswale section that we're focused on. This is what it looked like originally.
Can you please define bioswale?
Oh, yes.
It's the first time I've ever heard of it.
I'm sorry, yeah. It's very similar to a rain garden, but it's just a long linear area. So for example, if you have a big parking lot, that water runoff has to go somewhere, and often it will go into this long swale that's just a long strip to slow down the water. But a bioswale is then planted with native plants and as a way to slow down the water so it's not moving so fast, and then again the wildlife habitat benefit as well. So very similar to a rain garden, but rain garden's generally more kind of rounder shape that's getting runoff from a roof and letting it soak into the ground. So this is like kind of a two-step. And here you see it full of water with us planting this. Plants taking off here. And, you know, personally, I think most of you probably agree, it looks a lot nicer than it did. And you see the pollinators that come to these too, and we've had deer come into them as well, and so it's fun for that aspect. And here you can see, you know, after not that long, one growing season, they did really well, these native plants. We also did tree wells. So I'm not going to get too much into this because it's not what the talk is totally about, but a tree well is also a way to capture runoff instead of having it go in a storm drain in a parking lot. So if you want to know more about that, I'd be happy to after. But this is kind of what they look like. Instead of having it run into a storm drain, that water can go into the tree, and then if it's excess, it will then go into the storm drain, so it's not a safety hazard. We've also done a project in Canton last year, and this drain, this was an area that was flooding right next to the Farmington River in Collinsville, and the drain was at the bottom, so everything was just rushing off straight into the river. The town raised that drain up so that if we have crazy flooding, it will go into there as opposed to flooding the walkway. So again, you've got to keep in some safety considerations. But then we added plants to this as well, providing some habitat. And then in town here, we first did one at Risha Beach, so this was just a kind of a planning meeting. This is more of an educational one. It's not super large, but it has been working well and collecting a lot of runoff from the road and that parking area. I don't know if any of you have been up there and seen it. And right as we were planting it, we had a bee come and visit one of the turtle heads, right as we were still there working and everything. So that was like, yes, it's worked. And then here you can see in the spring after flooding that it was doing its job. And this one we kind of created more of a rockway where more of the water was coming to help slow it down to a first pool, and then to the second pool that you see a little closer in the photo here to help slow down the water and capture it. And then we also did a project with the state, and I think this is largely thanks to Highland Lake Watershed Association. They had been pushing for this for a long time. Finally, the state came and redid the boat launch area, regraded it, and put in 3 bioswales. But they didn't plant it, they just put in the swales themselves, and they reached out to us to do the designs and the planting. So when they were done, this is what it looked like, new pavement, and there's actually 3 here, bioswales, and you can see right off the bat, they're holding water instead of having that rush into the lake. This you can't really see, so you can talk to me later, but you know, picked a variety of native plants, some of them native cultivars, to establish in this location. And you know, you can have fun with this even on your own, for your own property. It's kind of fun to do a little design and figure out where you want the plants and what colors, you know, keeping in mind that the deepest part where the most water is going to be kind of in the center, and then thinking about the berms of a rain garden, you know, that's going to be plant species that can tolerate a lot of drought. And we had a whole bunch of volunteers help us as well, and maybe even some of you here, I'm not sure, help do the planting. It was a little bit later in the season than I wanted to plant, so we will be doing a refresh this spring. And so yeah, we have the 3 there. And if you're interested, on our website, we'll post when we're doing some of these refreshes, because it was fairly late in the season. Ideally, I like to plant in the spring when we have more rains, but they were doing their job right off the bat as well. So I mentioned before the watershed-based management plan. So we got funding from Connecticut DEP to do this plan for the Mad and Still River. This is EPA funding, an EPA plan. So this will probably take 2 years, but we finally have the contract now, so we can start reaching out to our partners, including the Conservation Commission, and creating a plan to improve the water quality of the Mad and the Still, and finding locations in town where we can do more of these green infrastructure projects, the rain gardens and the bioswales. And then currently, with our River Smart program, we are funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Long Island Sound Futures Fund, which is all about reducing polluted stormwater that would eventually run to Long Island Sound. And with that, I do have some free kits to hand out today, and if people want more, they can just jot down their information, and I'll figure out a way to get more downspout kits. So when you have gutters on your house, sometimes they just kind of pour out right at the base, and that's not good. It can lead to basement flooding and so on. Sometimes they're actually hooked up to a stormwater system. So we encourage people to try to disconnect that and send the rain that's hitting your roof into a natural area. Just into a lawn is better, but preferably into a newly created rain garden. So we have these diverter kits that you can attach and kind of stretch out, get a little further away from your home, and then ideally send that water into a natural area. So if anyone wants those, you're welcome to those as well. And we do have a number of resources as well. UConn has a great rain garden guide for sizing it, for the types of plants to pick, depending on if you're in a more shady area and so on. And then we also have a number of resources of what you can do at home on our frwa.org website too. So yeah, with that, thank you, and questions will be later.
Thank you, Laura. Our next speaker is Michelle Winkler. She's going to talk about invasive plants and native alternatives. Michelle is an advanced master gardener with extensive experience in horticulture education and community outreach through the UConn Master Gardener Program, and is president of the Cherry Brook Garden Club. She will speak about native alternatives to invasive plants and how choosing natives in landscaping can support healthier, more resilient local ecosystems.
How is everybody? First of all, thank you for hosting us. I think it's really cool that your town is doing this.
It's really our pleasure.
Yeah. So, I don't have a background in science or horticulture. I was a self-taught gardener who did the Master Gardener Program in 2014. And thanks to Sally, that's why I'm here. But I've done a lot of experimentation on my property in Cannes. So I just want to start by saying you don't need to be an expert to do any of this, and it might seem like a lot of information, but you can just continue to learn. So this was my inspiration. I had never heard of Douglas Tallamy. Have any of you heard of him? A few of you? So he spoke at the flower show this year. He was in West Hartford a couple weeks ago. He's kind of a guru in the ecological gardening movement, and he's co-founded an organization called Homegrown National Park. So that's the first website I would say go to if you're interested in this idea and you want to kind of educate yourself. He's got 2 books that I happen to own. He has a new book out, which I don't have. So I brought my copies if you want to look through them afterwards. But it was very inspirational to me. He's a professor with a PhD in entomology, insects, so he knows way more than I do. But he's been quite an inspiration for many of us gardeners. So I said I would talk about invasive plants, and that is kind of a bummer because they can really become this monoculture. So this picture is a stand of mugwort, which is on the invasive plant list. And it is really, really, really hard to eradicate. It grows underground by rhizomes, which kind of spread sideways in both directions. And we say, what is the definition? One of the definitions is they're not from around here. They're not indigenous. Well, what does that mean? What do we mean by that? We brought it from elsewhere. Did we do it on purpose? Did we mean to make such a mess? No, of course we didn't. Of course we didn't. Mugwort, and any plant that you see that ends in wart, usually was a medicinal plant.
Yeah.
So, of course, the European settlers brought this on purpose. I don't remember what mugwort was good for, maybe like respiratory things. There's one called pilewort that's good for hemorrhoids. There's all sorts of different plants. This happens to be one that grows really aggressively. And how does that happen? There are no natural enemies. So maybe you say, I think it'd be a really great idea to bring Japanese knotweed into the garden because it's pretty. Well, maybe it is kind of pretty. I don't think it's that pretty because it's awful to try to get rid of. But you bring it, but you don't bring its natural enemies. And so it really can grow much better than some of the native plants. So it has this potential to naturalize. And you might say, what does naturalize mean? And it means escape your garden, escape a cultivated area, like go into the forest or go into your neighbor's yard. So it just really can out-compete what was growing here before the European colonists came. And that means less biological diversity for the insects that we were talking about earlier. And a lot of work trying to get rid of these things. So this is a picture from my property. Does anybody recognize this little guy?
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet, very good. So it looks way different. I meant to bring this giant bittersweet piece I have that's curly like that. Almost looks like a walking stick, like it's so thick. That's what it turns into, big as your arm or even bigger. But if you learn to recognize some of these plants when they're tiny, you can get them out of the ground. So it's kind of depressing that they come out so early. If you go for a walk in the woods this time of year, that may be all you see. If you're lucky to see some spring ephemerals, but you're gonna see a bunch of invasive plants. Barberry, bittersweet, multiflora rose, honeysuckle, they're all greening up right now. And their signal is temperature, not day length, whereas the native plants evolved over time to listen to the signals of how much light there is. And as we get more and more day length, they're like, oh, it's time to wake up. And the native insects have trained themselves to wake up with the native plants. So the non-native plants aren't listening to that. They haven't been here long enough to figure that out. So we can say, oh, this is depressing, but we can also say, oh, well, I can see them, and they don't have a lot of leaves on them yet, and if I pull them, they don't have any seeds. So I don't have to worry about if I pull that bittersweet down in the fall, and it's got 1 million berries on it, and they drop all over the ground, and then I have 1 million more seedlings, it's a little bit easier. You could just pull it and leave it where you pull it, unless it's knotweed. So I worked for the University of Connecticut Extension. I know a lot about the invasive plant working group. I've been to, I think, every conference since like 2014. It's every other year. They're hosted in stores. The invasive plant working group isn't a Yukon group. It has a lot of Yukon members, but it's sort of like a consortium of people that work together and are interested. And their website is just a really great resource. There's a lot on there. In the rain garden presentation, you can navigate through there and find the native plant resources. You can find the list of all the Connecticut invasive plants. It's great. So they do provide opinions to the Connecticut Invasive Plants Council, which then provides opinions to the state legislature. And so the state legislature recently voted to accept some addition of plants to the list. So these plants will be banned from sale at nurseries. So when I first learned about some of these plants, I was like, what? You can buy these in a nursery? And I mean, you can ask yourself why that would be. If you were a nursery grower and you had invested money and resources into growing out these plants, and then the state says you can't sell those anymore, that's tricky. It's their livelihood. So it's a phased-in process. So better late than never, I say. And the final one on there, Norway maple, won't be banned until 2030. And I think that's because it's a tree. And so it takes longer to grow those out. But if you ever go underneath a Norway maple, in Torrington where I used to work, there was this church like right down the road from our office, and there were hundreds of seedlings. And it was a beautiful, beautiful burgundy Norway maple, but if you mow under it, then you kill them all. But if they spread into the woods, there's nobody there to mow them. So that's part of the problem. And then here are some of our big hitters, which are over here on this sign. You can look at pictures later if you're not sure what they are. You probably recognize most of them. The last one, Tree of Heaven, has gotten a lot of press because of the spotted lanternfly, and that's its favorite. Its favorite plant. But if it doesn't have that, it'll be on grapevines and fruit trees and all sorts of things. So, all right. So, what is the importance of native plants? If I get rid of all these invasive plants on my property, and if you need advice about that, you can reach out to your local extension office. You can look at the Connecticut Invasive Plant Working Group website. If you learn to recognize them, you can pull them. But what are you going to do once you pull them? It's possible, if your property has a seed bank of native plants, you might just get some. On our property, we have areas where spice bush is starting to grow, winterberry is starting to grow, where we had honeysuckle and multiflora rose. But sometimes it's almost like you have to restore your property. You can't just get rid of the invasives and expect it to be like a national park. It won't be. So why would I want to have native plants? Do you recognize that caterpillar? A juicy little monarch caterpillar. So that's on butterfly weed. And I love that its little poops are there because it like eats and poops, just like a baby. And then you recognize the critter on the other side. It was a porcupine eating milkweed. I was like, wait a minute, haven't monarchs evolved over, thousands of years to be able to eat this gross, sticky, poisonous plant? How can it eat that? But apparently, in small doses, it can. And nothing else wants to eat it. So more importance. We talked about host plants. So that's a specialized relationship between a specific plant and a specific insect. So the monarch needs the milkweed plant to lay its eggs because that's what caterpillars eat. So there's lots of other plants like that. So if you like a certain type of butterfly or a certain type of moth, which we usually don't think are as pretty as the butterflies, but they're really important because they have big juicy caterpillars too, you can figure out what that is. So they've adapted to local growing conditions over a long period of time. So some people say, well, this invasive plant seems to be doing really well here. Isn't that great? And I can see why you might want to grow barberry because the deer don't eat it. So that's a tough kind of balance. But once you get a native plant established, it needs far fewer resources. And that could be great in this era where sometimes we have drought in the summer, even though we have so much snow in spring during the early part of the year. And it's important to think about the whole food web, like our beekeeper said, that we can't just think about one little part of it. We have to think about how the insects are eaten by the birds and the frogs and the snakes and whatever eats them. It's all important. So you might ask, what is a native plant? And this is tricky. I was talking with my husband a few days ago, and we're like, well, we're just going to say the timing is pre-European colonists, but post-Ice Age. So that's a really big period of time. Because when the glaciers came through, pretty much there was nothing growing. And you might not even know there weren't earthworms here, because everything was scraped away. And if you go out in your backyard and you try to plant a garden, you're going to see a bunch of rocks. Thank you, glaciers. So basically, these are plants that were here several hundred years ago. And people argue about, well, is it native to Connecticut? And a lot of the plants we're growing are not native to Connecticut. They're native to New England. They're native to the Northeast region. So that can be tricky too. And one of the books that Sally brought is native plants of the Northeast. So I wouldn't get yourself too bent out of shape about saying this plant isn't native to Connecticut, because we are a fairly small state. What's more important is to figure out what grows well in your location, what kind of soil you have, whether you have sun or shade. So don't get too hung up. And if you like something like purple coneflower, it's native not to the Northeast, it's native more to the prairie, but it is a great pollinator plant. And not every plant on your property has to be native. You don't have to be a purist, but please don't plant any more invasives. So a few of my favorite plants, Doug Talmy, who I talked about earlier, he loves oaks. Oaks, like most oaks, support 400 or 500 different caterpillars. And if you ever see one of his presentations, he can go through like rapid fire about which bird eats which caterpillar and how many caterpillars a bird needs to feed its clutch of babies. I also really like native dogwood, Cornus florida. And then sassafras is a big tree, so oaks and sassafras you may not have room for on your property. So maybe you're just gonna go for shrubs and perennials, but sassafras is the one that has the mitten-shaped leaves. So I just think it's cute. This picture there is a button bush in bloom. And I never heard of that plant until a few years ago, and I have one now, and it's in sort of rain garden area, and it's about this tall now, so I think I have to cut it back a little bit. But it's really happy there, and it has the coolest little button flowers, and I see all sorts of bees on it. Sometimes I plant things because they smell good, so summer sweet and sweet spire both smell really good. Bee balm is one of my favorites, perennials. You can find it in different cultivars. The native Monarda is the one that's purple, Monarda fistulosa. But there are some that are like red and pinkish purple and all sorts of them. Mountain mint is another one of my favorite. It's not that pretty in terms of flowers, but I have seen so many wasps and bees on it. And if you have one of those apps on your phone where you try to identify plants and insects, every year I use it and I try to identify them, and then I probably forget what they're called, but they're just like the coolest creatures. A couple of other ones, like Liatris I love, but the bunnies seem to come and eat it as soon as it's about to bloom, so I don't know what that's about. Milkweed for the monarchs. Ironweed is a fun one, but it gets really tall, so if you have a small little garden, you might not want to plant that one. Where can I get these plants? So a lot of local garden clubs have plant sales. The conservation districts have plant sales. There's a couple of the flyers there for the Northwest Conservation District. You can order from any of the conservation district sales if you're willing to go on a road trip and pick up your plants. So there's the North Central Conservation District sale around the same time. That one I think is only pre-order. Ask your local nursery what they carry. If there's a plant that you figured out you just have to have and you don't see it, ask them to order it. And if the more people that ask them for plants that are native or nativars, the more they're going to carry them. Go to one of your local garden club meetings and get to know some of the members, and maybe they'll be like, oh, I have a ton of mountain mint, I'm happy to share. It's a good way to get plants. Volunteer. I know people who volunteer at Roaring Brook Nature Center in Canton in the garden. They get to dig up plants and take them home. It's kind of addictive. But how do you know what you want to plant? That's also difficult. It's probably not a good idea just to walk into the nursery or the plant sale and say, that's pretty, I'll grow that. It's probably best to do a little research, either books or online resources. So I have a bunch of resources. I can share this PDF, you can take pictures, you can ask me after, but these are a bunch of different ones, and so this one you can type in, I think this one you can type in your zip code, and then it'll come up, and if you keep scrolling down through the page, you'll get not just trees and shrubs, but perennials, and they're supposed to be for your region. And then this is a similar one the Native Plant Trust has. This one has all kinds of drop-down menus, and you can get really specific, and you can say that you have like sun, part shade, dry soil. It's pretty helpful. might have to dig up your whole lawn. This one you can find on the Invasive Plant Working Group site. You can download this entire manual as a PDF and have it on your own computer if you want to. I have seen physical copies at Yukon events, so I think it might be possible to order one from the website. We have one in the extension office if you want to visit there and look at it. And then this is a really helpful one too, because you can go in and you can see there's different plant nurseries in Connecticut that say they carry certain plants. So instead of just driving all over the place, you can target it. I do know Earth Tones Native Plant Nursery. I went there for the first time last summer, and that's a really cool place. The way they have it set up, you can sort of fall in love with a lot of plants. And then Lisa Newell didn't come tonight, but she's a local ambassador for the Xerces Society, and she also has a native plant business called Rewild. And she gave a talk for my garden club this fall, and she had handouts of this. So if you go to their website, you can get one specifically for the Northeast. And it has these cute, you can't probably see it, but it has these really cute little symbols, like, oh, this plant is good for birds, this plant is good for bees, hummingbirds, caterpillars. So that's really nice, and it has symbols for like sun and shade. So, to sum it up, be a good neighbor. Invasive plants can spread to neighboring properties, and including the forest. So at my house, we don't have any burning bush. When we bought the property, there was barberry, lots of multiflora, rose, and honeysuckle, which I think had been like a living hedge for livestock at one point. But the burning bush, if you just walk up the street a few houses, there's a huge hedge of it. And boy, does it look gorgeous in the fall when it's red. But there are so many baby burning bushes that come to my property because the birds eat the berries, and then those are like perfect little fertilizer poop packets that drop on the ground and sprout. So I've learned to recognize them when they're small so I can get them out more easily. But yeah, non-native plants, they can beautify your property, but they don't provide a lot of ecological value. So I would never be one to say, don't plant anything that's not native. I have several peonies, I think they're beautiful. What else do I have? I have hosta that aren't native, quite a few things. But you try to keep it to a minimum. And if you're gonna plant those, then plant things for the other creatures. So that's sort of the gradation. It's like, don't do invasives, non-natives, they can look pretty, they're not spreading into the wild, that's good. Native plants, that's great. And the more of us who participate, the more connected spaces there will be. And that was Doug Townley's idea, that it's kind of like each of us are this little tiny spot, a little dot on the map, and we can't necessarily, we don't want to take over and make every part of America a national park. Of course we don't. More property than not is private property. More of it than not is a lawn. So what can we do? If we can educate people and get them to do their small little part, their little drop in the bucket, it can make a difference. Instead of sort of looking around and saying, there's nothing I can do, there's invasives everywhere, we can do a tiny part. And thank you for coming tonight and being interested in helping.
Now, I'm not sure how we should do this. Maybe you guys can just sit up here
Okay.
and people can ask questions. Anyone who's interested can ask a question. I'll stay out of the way.
Yep.
I'm not gonna block for you.
My question is, can you talk a little bit about garden cleanup and all the leaves and stems and things like that that are around right now? And what your thoughts are about that? Okay.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Again, a lot of stuff on the ground is great habitat for insects, particularly like mason and solitary bees. But there is also a certain amount of cleanup that does need to happen for the propagation of plants, particularly wildflower plants. They need direct soil contact to continue reseeding. So if you have a really thick thatch layer built up over a few years, you could absolutely lose a good wildflower meadow to that. So that one can go both ways, unfortunately.
Yeah, for us with meadow planting, for example, we want to leave stuff standing. A lot of people, you know, in the fall, they want to cut everything down because it looks a little cleaner and neater. But if you actually leave it, it provides so much benefit for overwintering birds and other insects, just to leave it, and then in the spring, you can then cut, you know, really early spring, right around now or even sooner, cut things down and clean it up. So it's a bit of, you know, kind of changing your mindset a little bit, because maybe it looks a little scraggly, but thinking about the benefit that that adds is huge.
I always say too that if you really insist on making it look tidy, you know, maybe your garden bed is right near your front door, you can cut it, but then leave it intact. Either like leave it laying flat, or have kind of a hidden area where you could pile it, because if there are insects in it, then they're asleep, they're overwintering. Just don't like chop it up, don't put it in the garbage, don't put it in a hot compost pile.
Yep.
You mentioned about knotweed, like, or some of the invasive plants, just pull them out and leave them, except knotweed. So I literally just found a sidewalk in front of my house. It was a carpet of knotweed, and I just dug it up before it grew. So what do I do with that then, if you can't just, like?
Yeah, so knotweed, you can solarize it, so you can put it in a plastic bag and just put it like, if you have a space like on your driveway, just leave it there to sort of bake, and that way it won't be as heavy.
Because right now it's just the bulbs, I ripped out all the bulbs.
Yeah,
so,
and it's hard to get every last bit.
yeah.
So you'll have to
This is
check.
year 3, so.
Yeah, you'll have to check. So you're learning, that's good. Yeah, so, yeah, that's one, you know, if you can completely dry it out and it looks completely dead, then you could leave it in a pile outside, and then make sure you observe that pile, that not some little tiny pieces sprouting. But that one, like, if you think about it as sort of like, you know, how bamboo has joints, so knotweed, like each of those little nodules can sprout. And that's why that one is really, really hard to get rid of. And then there's a few of the other ones, like multiflora rose, how it arches. If the tip makes contact with the ground, it can actually make new roots and make a new plant.
So, but if you cut that and then it falls on the ground, will it root?
No.
Okay.
No, yeah, and what I usually do, you know, if you have a wooded area where you can pile stuff, it's not getting a lot of sunlight once the leaves come out. If you just pile it, then it can be wildlife habitat.
Yep.
In the garden, you had a lot of leaves left over from last year. Did you put mulch on top of that, or just work it in with the leaves themselves, or just eliminate leaves? I would think that the leaves would be a benefit.
To a degree, they tend to make the soil rather acidic. Every soil test I've ever pulled from this neck of the woods, minus usually like an old dairy field, is going to be somewhere in the mid to high 5s as far as pH goes. Kind of like we talked about earlier. Tend to be sandy soil around here. You see a lot of oaks, you see a lot of evergreens. Tend to like that type of profile, which is also a more acidic type profile. Most plants are going to be really beneficial in that low to mid 6 pH range. So yeah, I would say mulch them up small if you're going to do that, and probably still I would want to compost a lot of them. They're not the biggest building blocks of soil that we have to offer. Yep.
No mow May.
Uh-huh. Oh, I can talk all day about it.
That
See,
must
that's
get
what-
some real aggravation for people, because people are so used to wanting it to look very precise. I'm kind
It's-
of good with it, so what do you do, start in June?
So I had a whole rant about this that unfortunately Mr. Carter sold a whole bunch of times.
Give me a semi.
It comes from England, and it doesn't, it's not appropriate for us.
Don't do it.
I was gonna say.
We need a different month. It's a great idea executed at the wrong time of the year. May is when a ton of stuff is already in flower.
You need a pollinator garden. Like, if you're trying to have.
No mow July,
if
no
you're
mow
trying to have a
August.
lawn, you know, what I do.
I tend to stop mowing like, like August, September instead of earlier.
Yeah.
May is a great
I mean,
time
you
for
had
all
in
our
your
natives to be in
presentation,
flower.
Mow
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah.
Mow higher is good.
How higher is higher?
Like
A couple of inches.
But kind of like what you were saying, I mean, some people have HOAs that they have to abide by, or you're gonna get fined. So run right up as high as you can in that sort of situation.
Your lawnmower can't make it.
lawnmower.
If you don't mow your lawn for a month in
Yeah.
May, and it's just grass,
It's gonna be insane.
there's no benefit whatsoever.
There's no flowers, it's
There's
just
no
tall
flowers.
grass.
When
It's
you
just
say
a
higher,
mess.
how high are you talking about? 2 inches?
So
No.
the science on it is the less you mow, the better you're gonna be as far as she pointed out, as if there's flowers. So every couple inches, statistically, it's not quite linear, but more flowers will be reproduced by plants. And if you can get down to, as discussed, a mow once in the spring, more like a wildflower meadow for sustaining its health, something like that. So it's really gonna be site specific on what you can get away with. Like I said, if you got an HOA and it's a set, you don't wanna get fined. Like, this is an expensive world to live in right now, so there's no reason to like fight that battle. If you can get it changed, great, but if not, run right up against it. Whatever your comfort zone is, unfortunately, as things get taller as well, tick populations will start to increase. Having had Lyme disease multiple times myself, not a big fan of ticks. So it's all a pros and cons list on what's specific to your site, your goals, and what you're dealing with.
And if you have some wildflowers in your lawn, you could mow around just
Yeah.
a little area.
Because I drive people crazy with the.
I have
going around
violets.
my lawn.
I have mountain blues. Well, if you make it look intentional, if you
Yeah.
make it look
Yes,
like
yes.
it's a nice little.
Add to
area.
that area, straight lines look
Yeah.
intentional as opposed to just like a forgotten about clump.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of little things you can do.
Yeah,
There-
if all you
there
have
is
is lawn,
hope.
it's no benefit.
Yeah.
I would share that there is hope, because I have a 14-year-old granddaughter who pulled out more garlic mustard out of my yard, and she knew, she put it into bags, black bags, sealed it up, put it down my driveway, I had to leave it there for like 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
knows all this, and this is her, what she wants to go into as she gets older, so the nice thing is that it is catching on. We are
Oh,
getting
people
shit
care.
at this.
That's great.
People are
People
starting
care.
to
That's great. to
really
hear.
get it, I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
In the back?
Okay, we have a discussion every fall, about leave the leaves. Leave the leaves in the lawn, or do we break all the leaves up?
Again, it's a building block of soil, but it is not the best building block of soil that we have. So if it's all you got, yeah, I mean, you're raking them away, especially if you're bagging grass clippings. What organic material is breaking down into your soil that is going to replenish? Because plants are taking nutrients all the time. So you have to replenish that some way, and then that's where artificial fertilizers are gonna come in, and you don't really have a choice, because you've broken the model of sustainability. So if you're leaving grass clippings behind, if you're leaving leaves behind, of course, you're helping build soil. But again, you might also be dealing with rules and regulations, HOAs. If you're not, it's organic matter, it's gonna break down into soil. If you make it smaller, it's gonna break down quicker. The bigger it is, the longer it takes.
And you don't wanna leave them on your grass all winter, so there's nothing wrong with having some lawn.
Yeah.
What you don't want is more lawn than you use.
Then usable
You
space.
know, if you have kids that play soccer, or
Yeah.
you play croquet, or, you know, you have a dog, like, we shouldn't make people feel terrible for liking what they like. If you like purple flowers and I like red flowers, that's okay, we don't have to be the same. But if you have a lawn, you need to maintain it, whether you have an HOA or you just want it to live. Like, if you leave leaves on it all winter and you smother it, then it's gonna die, and then all you're gonna have are weeds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could rake them to another part of your property.
Yep.
What is the latest on why honeybees are disappearing?
Whole bunch of stuff.
I saw your list. We had none of those problems for 50 years. And must have been 15 years ago, gradually downhill, downhill, downhill. Wouldn't make it through the winter, would be in the spring, then disappear. We had no pesticides in our area. I have state forest around me, then big fields in front of that. We did nothing, there was nothing on that list.
Two things in my particular opinion, which is a bit of a deviation from what we're here to talk about. A specific class of insecticides, neonicotinoid insecticides. And what I have learned being in the business and especially beekeeping for a long time, is that there is almost no one that doesn't know that these sort of things are harmful to the environment. But as the old saying goes, you know, keeping up with the Joneses, a lot of people will preach organic, no nothing, and I'll put beehives out that just fail. Why? Because they're doing all that stuff.
Well, we
So
have-
there's a very dishonest approach amongst even neighbors on what's actually going on in their property.
We have no
And-
neighbors, we have no neighbors, state forests all around.
Bees will forest up to 5 miles
Fields with
away.
no neighbors.
Bees will forage up to 5 miles away. Science tells us that. So I guarantee you, there are plants within 5 miles of wherever you put a beehive in this country, in the lower 48, that has those chemical classes within
Well,
it.
for years our bees flew, you know, how many miles away, up to 2, right, 2 or more.
They want to fly as little as possible. I find the honeybee to be an incredibly lazy insect.
There was some talk about the, yeah, it's cute. There was some talk about microwaves interfering with their,
Hasn't been proven.
okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Totally could be, but science currently does not say that, so I really can't speak to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
But
we gave up, we just, that's it.
Oh, it's, anyone that knows me, it's all I do. Keeping bees is beyond a full-time job. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah, Michelle, do you have any
Yeah.
recommendations for mugwort management? In other words, if we uproot it, is there anything you can plant that will outcompete it, or even the non-native plant?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I have a goldenrod. I think Canada goldenrod might fight it out with it. How big is your area?
Oh, in acres.
Okay, yeah. 'Cause it was a small garden bed, you could try solarizing it. And solarizing is basically just like, you know, baking it
Yeah.
and killing it, but if it's that big. In Canton, along the pollinator pathway, there was a huge stand of Japanese knotweed. And so they've tried multiple experiments. And I actually think, you know, on a homeowner's scale, that is something you could try. You could divide it into a couple of different areas and try different things. So you could buy something called a silage tarp, which are pretty big, like maybe like 80 by 50 feet.
Right.
And you could see, you know, it does that. And if it's durable enough, it'll last that you could move it. But you could try, you know, seeding the area with something else. And you could also try just repeated cutting. But again, that would be on a small scale.
Yeah.
You'd have to try like one area
This is
that you decided to attack.
One of the areas where herbicide, at least in my
Yeah.
opinion, is like, you can't ban herbicide because our
Yeah.
truly nasty, non-native invasive plants, it's
Yeah.
one of your only real ways to get rid of it. Because you're
Yeah.
gonna break your back
Yeah.
trying to get a handful of plants under control, and this is where a lesser of two evils
Yeah,
is
I
somewhat
agree.
necessary to restart a native wilding project.
But then what do you plant, that it doesn't come back?
Yeah,
Site conditions, and you gotta keep on top of it. Because
yeah.
if it got that big to begin with, you have something in the area that's
Yeah,
propagating
and
it.
sometimes the pH, like if you do a soil test and figure out what's going on there, that could be helpful. The speaker that you had before, Tom Zetterstrom, like, he has an invasive management business, I think more in Fairfield County. He might be someone you could call just for some recommendations, not necessarily to hire him, but.
I think mowing's not enough. I was at
No,
Hamanas.
mowing actually.
Hamanas State Park a couple of years
Yeah.
ago, and the grass is cut, you know, an inch, and
Yeah.
it's mugwort.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's, pruning stimulates plants, so mowing stimulates growing.
Could you please explain the solarizing? So would you cut it down and then cover it with
Yeah,
something
yeah, you
that'll
would wanna,
cook it?
you would wanna cut it so that you could lay the tarps over it. And a silage tarp, if I recall, like one side is black and one side is light. And I've also seen people just buy like heavy mill clear plastic. But I'm told that the black is better because the sunlight doesn't come through.
The clear plastic can get tough, because if it's not sunny enough, you made a
Yeah.
greenhouse. The
Yeah.
plants
Yeah.
love
It's like-
greenhouses. And it like encourages them. So you need a lot of direct sunlight for that one. Because you're looking to get the soil temp above like 120, but really above 140 degrees where your soil becomes nothing can live in it. So you're killing the roots, you're drying everything out beyond a rate that the plant can keep up with.
Yeah, and cutting can do that for certain plants. You know, if you just keep cutting it, you're repeatedly forcing it to regrow. So it's taking its energy to put into the regrowth as opposed to establishing a good root system. But mugwort is one
It doesn't seem
that
to
will
care.
just
It doesn't seem to care.
not do anything.
In the back, yep.
I'm just wondering if the three of you might share your slides and add your techniques for, could maybe put them, we have a space on the Conservation Commission, it's part of the town website, and we also have a Facebook page, but if you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure.
Adding that everybody can access those
References, yeah.
Absolutely.
Which email should we send it to?
I'll give you my email.
Okay.
If you're okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Question on rain gardens. Are they kind of the next best thing from the rock lined culverts?
Yes, they're much better than that. You know, sometimes we'll see the towns just kind of putting in rocks just to capture the stormwater, and that does help slow it down. But otherwise, you know, there's no plants there with the deep roots that are actually absorbing that water. You know, it's not really adding much benefit to the environment at all. So yes, rain gardens or a vegetated bioswale is then providing that habitat, providing those deep roots that are going to absorb a lot more water. So that makes a big difference.
Yep.
I have a lot of ferns, like are those good to leave? Like the simple backyard, the water runs down and it's full, just chock full of
They're
ferns.
like prehistoric plants, absolutely.
It's like living mulch.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
alright, so there's also like, it's all oak trees, it's not cleared, so there's the leaves and the ferns, and that's good to leave.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
You could try, you know, getting some shade tolerant native plants and just tucking them in and see what
Yeah,
happens.
I'm slowly working my way back. It was-
Yeah. Don't do too much. That's my best advice.
Are ferns invasive?
Ferns are not invasive. Yeah.
When they're happy, they're happy. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, poison ivy is a native plant.
Exactly.
But it can be very aggressive. So the terminology can be confusing because you could call a plant a thug, but it might be native. Virginia creeper's native, it could be a thug. I already have poison ivy on my hands.
Yep. Yep.
Do you have a list of professionals who would either help or actually make a rain garden, and how much is the cost?
So, well, the cost can vary hugely, so it really depends on site. But you could talk to me because we actually do have some funding to help people establish a rain garden and come out. And then there are, you know, we're happy to help as much as we can, but there are also a number of local people that know about designing rain gardens if you do want to hire it out. But it's hard to say exactly on a price. It could be a few $100s, it could be several thousand. It all depends on the scale you want and also the size of plants you put in. So, you know, you could yourself in a smaller area do some calculations, make sure it's not too close to your house and so on. You know, dig it out manually, and you could put in like plugs or even seeded plants that are very small, a lot less expensive. Or if you want a bigger impact quicker and have more money to throw at it, you can buy larger plants that kind of give it a jump start as well. But I find that the plugs work really well, those just small little plants. As long as you time it right, and spring is a great time to plant when there's more rain coming in. But yeah, please reach out to us. We could help guide you in the right direction.
I know Michelle mentioned earth tones or something.
Yeah.
I've been to a presentation where they also showed like the design of rain gardens they had made.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one. Lisa Newells, she moved, like she was borrowing someone's space on a farm in Canton, but I think now she might have a location in Simsbury. Yeah, so her website's called Rewild, and then Earth Tones Native Plant Nursery is in, I want to say Woodbury. Yeah. Trying to think what else. Like Adam Wheeler from Broken Arrow Nursery recently came to speak at my garden club. And like the guy who started that nursery was a mountain laurel breeder, so I'm sure they have native shrubs, but maybe not perennials. I think another one of the nurseries on the Connecticut list is Nature Works, but that's a bit of a road trip. I think that's Branford, Connecticut.
Yeah, there's
Holly,
Stonehenge.
can you think of any others, like nearby?
I'm thinking Massachusetts, Native Plant Trust, but that is
Oh yeah, the farm.
the farm, and I mean, that's actually a great resource because they have everything there.
Yeah, that's actually a great resource. And I would say go visit the local rain garden areas and see, you know, when those plants are in bloom, decide like, oh, I like that one.
Yeah, the best is just go tour them, see what's there, and
In Canton, my garden club, Cherry Brook Garden Club, did a native plant demonstration garden right down from the bicentennial rain garden that your organization put in. So you could have a twofer there, and then you could keep walking on the bike trail, and you could see the pollinator pathway, which Holly and Lisa have both.
We're on the map.
Yep.
It's on Google Maps.
Yep, so that's a pretty impressive space, and you could get an idea of both shrubs and perennial plants that you like.
There's a, White Memorial has one, a little native garden.
Okay,
It's not very extensive.
yeah.
They have a chestnut grove.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, but looking at actual gardens is a good way to kind of get started. If you look too much like in fancy magazines or websites, they make it look too easy. It's like, unless you have a professional gardener.
It's overwhelming, there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, on my property, we have over 4 acres, and like half of it almost was lawn when we moved in. And so we turned a big chunk of the backyard into a vegetable garden. We turned part of the front yard where there was common milkweed, we just stopped mowing, which is not always a great idea because you don't always get great things. So I got a lot of common milkweed and a lot of goldenrod, but now I've been slowly digging out areas and buying plugs, starting seedlings in milk jugs, buying plants, spending my retirement.
it does get addictive the more you start, even if you start in just a really small area and then you see the benefit of it, and I don't know, just getting your hands dirty makes you want to do more for some reason.
Yeah.
Or at least I think that's
But yeah,
what
my spouse is like the invasive plant manager, so he'll disappear off into the 2-acre wooded part and, you know, make giant piles of invasive plants. And you asked like what you do once you take them out. Like we had one area that was all multiflora rose and honeysuckle, and we turned it into a fire pit area. We made our teenager at the time like carry heavy bags of pea gravel that we bought at, you know, Home Depot or Lowe's, and made her like pull out all the seedlings and spread the gravel and turned it into a sitting area. So it doesn't always have to be plants, because we have a lot of gardens.
Question, any favorite ground covers to replace our vincas and our
Yeah, so you can get a native Pachysandra, Allegheny spurge, I think is the common name. There's a great, I forgot to mention this website, but the Mount Cuba Center in Delaware. So that's a real road trip if you want to go on a road trip. They have demonstration gardens, and they have lists on their website of various types of plants. They've done demos for several years. So Carex is sedge. So sedge is a good, like, some of them are good in shady, dry areas, like under a tree. You could also just leave the leaves under a tree, and they will smother some of the plants, and it'll be mulch. A lot of people like strawberry, like wild strawberry, barren strawberry. They don't do well though with other plants, like they get crowded out. you have to kind of do maintenance. It can be hard to establish things, and I think people get frustrated. But yeah, I think I would smother them with leaves first.
Other than leaves and wood chips.
Yeah.
So the vancomycin is invasive and it's not good?
It's not invasive because it's not on the invasive plant list. So, I mean, it's aggressive. Depends on what it's doing. Like, I've left Pachysandra under a big shagbark hickory because if I take it out, it's going to be all bittersweet vines and poison ivy. So until I decide what to do, I've left it. It's not invasive, but it's aggressive.
Yeah, it spreads.
Yeah, I see it in the woods.
I see it in the woods.
So I don't know if like the people who own the property before me just ripped it up and like threw it there, but it's green right now.
Good, nice.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes if you don't have a replacement, it's better to leave it if it's,
It's pretty, and it
Yeah.
flowers, and it's low, and it's a good drip edge. If
Yeah.
you have it near your house and it's contained,
yeah.
you know.
And maybe focus on starting a native plant garden elsewhere.
Yeah,
Put your energy there.
yeah.
Are pussy willows now considered invasive? I've seen it out in the can't ship to Connecticut for pussy willows.
I've not heard that, but I have willow that's native on my property. So I'm not sure, maybe a different kind.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's an early D.
Yeah, yeah, maybe it's a different variety. Any other questions?
I have a question on fertilizers.
Uh-huh.
What can you use that's good for your garden?
For which part of your garden?
Like for growing flowers and vegetables?
So you could buy specific for vegetables. If you wanted something organic, you could try fish emulsion, which is a little bit smelly. You could really go on a deep dive and you could make your own compost tea for your vegetable garden. I see fertilizers a bit like vitamins. So if you can give your plants, like build it up over time with compost, in the long run it's more nutritious than just giving it like a shot of, cookies and chips. So it just depends, there's a lot of brands out there of fertilizer. I've never fertilized my lawn ever. It doesn't look like a golf course, but it's green. It's got clover in it. It's got dandelions. It's got other things, but it's green. And if you mow higher and leave the grass clippings, that provides nitrogen, so you don't necessarily need to fertilize. Something like a house plant that doesn't get replenished, like you have to fertilize that, but outdoor stuff.
I would suggest pulling a soil test, and I like to use like a Yukon Soil Labs or something like that. If you tell them what you're trying to plant
Yeah.
and what's already there, they will make recommendations
Yep.
for what your soils are lacking.
Yep, the
Takes the
Connecticut,
guesswork right out of it.
yeah, the Connecticut Ag Experiment Station will also do a
Yeah.
soil test for you, and it's free versus, I used to work for Yukon, but I think it's $15 now, so if you had several garden areas, you could do one year, one the next year. But yeah, that's very helpful to know what you're dealing with. And if you do use something like compost, it usually takes more volume
Yeah.
than like commercial fertilizer. But yeah, if a plant is specifically struggling, you could reach out to your extension office, and there's several master gardeners here in the audience, and when they were master gardener students, they have to give 30 hours of volunteer time answering questions from the public. So that season will start soon, and if you have questions, there's no dumb question. It's part of their training, and it's very helpful that when people ask.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Familiar with a plant called black vineweed?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
I don't think it's on the invasive plant list, but I can check.
I think it's not native. Showed up in one of our conservation areas. Where it I think maybe the guy who did this brought it up.
I don't think it's on the list. I remember doing a phase one in the office.
Yeah.